Hi, I'm Bjarke. I am here today to tell you about the business model in cyber attacks and why do they attack us. My name is Bjarke. I'm a serial entrepreneur in cybersecurity. I am a business developer and I have the commercial responsibility in my companies. The agenda for today is the development of the trends within cyber attacks, the different forms of attack. We would focus on the commercially driven ones. I would like to talk about this new industry that has emerged, specifically ransomware as a service, and what I think the future holds for this industry. The business model development. I have found a few graphs. They are not to be taken too literally. It is just the trend, because in the perception of the industry, you cannot trust any of the numbers because the hidden numbers are so great. But as you can see on all these graphs, the trend is always upwards, and it is almost explosively upwards. And that is also what we are seeing. The different kinds of attacks. We have here from the Danish Center for Cybersecurity the threat of the different forms of cyber attacks. We'll quickly go through them. We have cyber espionage. That can be nation states. They would like to know if their competitive nations, what are their foreign policies, what are their security policies, where's the critical infrastructure, etc., to get a good overview of their competitive nations, should they move forward to be a hostile nation, for instance. We also have cyber espionage in the industry. So the largest companies in the world, they would very much like to be aware, does my competitor have an R&D advantage? Is there anything I could look into, perhaps getting a patent before they do in a specific area? That is a huge advantage. So the espionage in the industry is very large. The scale goes all the way up to very high. We need an extremely high by now. It has been this the last 8 years, I believe. Another form, which we'll focus on mostly today, is the cybercrime, also very high. And that is the commercially driven forms of attacks. We'll get back to that. We have the cyber activism. Whenever Denmark, for instance, gives aid to the Ukrainians, within minutes we see a very high activity on Danish governmental homepages, the Copenhagen airport, etc. It's usually DDoS attacks, which has, in best case, a mediocre effect, almost none. But it is very much a statement about, I disagree with what your nation just did, so I try to disrupt, is their agenda. It doesn't really harm much. The next one is the very contrary. We have destructive cyber attacks. It's on a low. And that is not because the risk or the concern is low, that is because the activity is low. Destructive cyber attacks is a whole video itself. It's very geopolitical. It is believed that our adversaries, our competitive nations, they might in fact already have backdoors 0 days in our system. They just didn't pull the trigger because it takes competences, it takes capabilities to build these options, but it takes motivation to execute. And the competencies and capabilities are very difficult to build. The motivation can change overnight or in an instant, actually. So we are, in fact, a bit concerned about the destructive cyber attacks, but it has a low activity in the threat from the National Cyber Security Center. Cyber terror, I will not go into that. We have the commercially motivated attacks that can be separated into two different primary attacks. We have the ransomware, which is very famous, it's very noisy, and we have the CEO/CFO fraud, which is a lot more subtle. While I go through the ransomware, I would ask you to try to think, what do you think are the percentage difference, the representation of these two attacks? We have the ransomware. Quickly run through. It's a whole video of itself also. We need to have access. They need to have access, of course. It can come in various ways. It could be you visiting a malicious website by accident. It could be phishing mail, you clicking on something you shouldn't have. technical vulnerabilities on an old server you forgot you had and it was AD joined, and there's a lot of ways in. But they need access. When they have access, they will start doing reconnaissance, and hopefully they will do escalation, because if they didn't, that means you have domain admins running around in your infrastructure, and you don't want that. So they do reconnaissance. What's your backup? How many servers do I have? Do I have micro-segmentation of your networks? How do we get around? And actually, we often see in the very large attacks, they have been inside the infrastructure for half years, whole years, because the retention time of backups is usually 180 days. So if they wait until after their 180 days, their backdoors into the system will also be on the backup. So they will have very high persistence. But they will do reconnaissance. They will try to find your domain admins and your global admins. When that happens and they are ready to attack, they will encrypt your systems. And that is oversimplified, just them putting a very long password on your systems, which you don't know, and you will have to pay in order to get the code back. So oversimplified, someone locks your house and you need to pay to get the keys back. Then starts the extortion. The extortion, that is a negotiation between you and the attacker, and that is very often based on the numbers they can find online, yearly financial reports with our revenue, and they take a percentage of that and ask for a ransom. The CEO and CFO fraud. Whoever guessed that it would be about 50-50, the guesstimates of the industry would have guessed correctly. And that surprises a lot, because you don't very often hear about these CEO and CFO frauds. That is a lot more targeted, and they need to follow specific persons, and of course it's usually the CEO of a company and the CFO, because they take the decisions and manage the money. I have an example that really sets the stage on how it's happening. I should give a disclaimer, it does not have a happy ending. Also some personal consequences, but let me explain it. I was talking to a CFO. We were talking about their cybersecurity posture and how I was able to aid them in their development. And while this was going on, they were looking to purchase a competition for 10 million Danish kroner. The negotiation was finalized, a very, very long negotiation. And the very last email from the CEO to the CFO, which there had been many of, the attacker was able to take this email in a manner in the middle attack and edit the account number. So instead of paying 10 million Danish kroner to the seller of the company, they transferred the money to the attacker. And before they were aware of this, the money was gone. And not only did the company struggle a lot because it was a lot of money for them, but in fact, the CFO, he ended up killing himself, being so overwhelmed by the responsibility he had in this case, which in my opinion was none, but it overcame him and he ended up committing suicide. It's a very sinister story. I'm very sorry for that, but it was in order to give the perspective that it is not only about money, it's also about, this is luckily the only case I've heard, but it's personal stress, it's people getting fired, people getting laid off because the company is struggling. Some companies go bankrupt from this. It's a really big problem, and it's not only financial. The new industry, as we call it. We have a situation where cybersecurity, if it was in fact a nation of its own, the guesstimates from the Center for Cybersecurity in Denmark in 2023 was that it would be the world's third largest country. We all know America to be the largest, closely followed by China. And then cyber attacks would in fact be the third largest, surpassing nations such as Germany and Japan, which tells a lot about the extent of this industry and also about the potential of it. We have a thing called the Big Mac Index, also called the Purchasing Power Party, that describes the ability to buy something in a specific country with a certain amount of money. And because there's Big Macs in every country, that is used as a reference. As you can see on the slides, we have countries like Switzerland and United States are very high on this. And that means that €1 million in Switzerland would have less purchasing power than, for instance, it would have in Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, etc. Being a poor country attacking a wealthy country makes very good sense because you can get a lot more purchasing power out of the same amount of money. Another perspective is what is called the Robin Hood effect, that these poor, often Eastern countries, they have a political motivation that is almost patriotic to attack these evil, rich Western countries. They are being motivated by the government to attack and to equal out the difference between these countries. So they, in their perception, these rich Western countries, they don't really need this money, and by taking it, they can aid their own society and bringing back the balance. So it's very political, it's very ideological between these almost Cold War fronts where nations such as Russia, North Korea, China, Iran, etc. have this opposition in the West. Then there is the fact that this is almost certainly a risk-free crime. Should I decide to go rob the local bank, I would most certainly get caught, and my benefits from it would be a mere few thousand euros. The commercial perspective of a cyber attack can be several millions euros, and the risk of getting caught is almost nil. And even if we learn that this would be, for instance, Vladimir and Petri from Moscow, what are the chances of getting to them? Nobody can get to them because Russia is pretty much in on it, and they will most certainly protect them. In no way they will give us Vladimir and Petri so we can prosecute them, and we are not able to go get them ourselves. So it is, in fact, a completely risk-free crime, which has this enormous commercial perspective, especially if you look at the purchasing power. So it's a perfect crime. Looking into the ransomware as a service, whenever there's a new industry, of course, there's new processes, there's new suppliers, etc. We have competencies that can be split up in different phases. You can be a specialist in making backdoors in companies and selling these. You can be an expert of getting business emails with or without passwords. Then the dark web, they have standard going rates on these different products and services. We have software as a service companies. Most famously is Logbit. That's a Russian company, almost you could call it, that one thing makes ransomware software as a service. They are told to have some terrific support because it is a free industry. If you have the best ransomware software as a service, you can help their clients gain more money, and that has a really high price on the market. So they have excellent 24/7 support. Should you be successful in extorting a company, you can make deals with Indian coal companies, for instance. That is completely legitimate businesses that has the equivalent of a Danish CVR number. They have time schedules, they have holiday requests, they have everything that a normal company has. And the employees of this company is just a regular job to them. Taking conversations from Western business representatives. I need your unique identifier, and now I will assist you in transforming your own currency into Bitcoins, and how do you transfer from this wallet to the extorter's wallet, and giving samples of your data, and then in the end giving you the password to your data. Do you decide not to pay or to fight back and being unsuccessful at that mostly, you can risk of having your data sold on the dark web. Here is a picture when Boeing, who didn't pay, had all their data published and sold to whoever wanted to pay for it. And I would assume that competitors, foreign nation states, would be very interested in the design layouts, the R&D, the customers, the future orders, etc. for a company of that size. Also on these marketplaces, you can have all these partly components sold. So it's a completely full-fledged industry where you can purchase anything. And what do I and we as industry think of the future for cyber attacks? As our common friend Walter White says, nothing stops this train. With a model that is the perfect crime, where it's so politically based, and it will always be a cat chasing a mouse, because IT is a very living organism. Whenever there's a line of code written, it could have a potential vulnerability, and that can be exploited. And this can go on forever. There's no stopping this industry in any foreseeable future. So if you're looking for a good industry to join, I would very much recommend that you join the cybersecurity industry. We really need additional people, not only technical, but also commercial people such as myself, project managers, etc. And I can very much recommend the excellent work being done by CyberSkills. Stay in touch on the channel, and I hope to see you out there in the industry.